Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the incredible story of one of history's most famous rulers, Cleopatra. She wasn't just a queen, she was a master strategist playing a high-stakes game for the survival of her entire kingdom.
Okay, so let's just think about this for a second. Being Queen of Egypt, it sounds pretty amazing, right? Ruling a rich kingdom, living in a palace. I mean, who wouldn't want that job?
Yeah, but for Cleopatra, being queen was more like a high-stakes survival game. We're talking family betrayals, powerful enemies, and a superpower breathing down her neck. We're gonna see exactly how she played her hand. All right, so let's start at the beginning. Section 1, the princess's survival game. And believe me, from the moment she was born, Cleopatra's life was anything but easy. So picture this. Cleopatra is born into this kingdom that is just fabulously wealthy. I mean, gold everywhere. But it was also in deep trouble. We're talking bad leadership from within and enemies all around. And the biggest threat of all? Well, that was a little place called Rome, rising across the sea. And this slide really gets to the heart of the problem. You've got Egypt, whose main goal is just survive, to keep their 300-year-old family dynasty going. And then you have Rome. Their goal? Expand, conquer, become the biggest power in the world. Egypt looked like the perfect prize. This was the impossible game board Cleopatra had to play on. Her life was just one crisis after another. I mean, just look at this timeline. As a teenager, she's forced out of her own country. She's barely an adult and she has to run from a kidnapping plot by her own brother and raise an army? It felt like every single time she got a foothold, the ground just crumbled right under her.
Okay, Section 2, her strongest ally, Rome. So, with all these threats closing in, what was her big move? What was her power up? Well, ironically, she turned to her biggest threat, Rome. Her strategy was brilliant. If you can't beat them, make them need you.
And you have to appreciate how bold this was. Cleopatra didn't just write a letter asking for help. No way. She engineers this legendary, almost cinematic meeting with Julius Caesar, literally the most powerful man in the world. And look, this wasn't just about love and romance. This was a political masterstroke. By getting his support, and later having a son with him, she basically tied Rome's fate to her own. Suddenly, keeping Egypt stable was Rome's problem too. All right, on to Section 3. The queen becomes a goddess. You know, having a Roman general on your side is great, but that's only half the battle. To really rule, Cleopatra had to win the hearts and minds of her own people. So how do you do that? How do you convince millions of Egyptians that you, a woman from a Greek-speaking family that many saw as outsiders, were their rightful, divinely chosen pharaoh? Well, she tapped into something incredibly powerful in Egyptian culture, the goddess Isis. Now, Isis wasn't just any goddess, she was a huge deal, a symbol of motherhood, of power, of protection, basically one of the most beloved figures in all of Egypt. And this is where her political genius really shines. She would literally show up in public dressed as Isis. Now, this wasn't a costume party. This was a powerful political message. It told the Egyptian people, hey, I'm not just some foreign queen. I am the living version of your goddess, a true pharaoh sent to protect you. It was an amazing way to build loyalty.
Okay, Section 4, the final battle. This brings us to the ultimate showdown. It's Cleopatra and her Roman ally Mark Antony versus a unified Rome, led by the cold, calculating Octavian. And everything comes down to one epic naval battle, the Battle of Actium.
So, when you look at the forces here, you can see the huge strategic problem they faced. Antony and Cleopatra had these massive, heavy ships, like floating tanks with tons of firepower. But Octavian had way more ships, and they were smaller, lighter, and much faster. It was the classic matchup, raw power versus speed and agility. So you'd think, with those powerful ships, they'd have an edge, right? So why on earth did the battle end with them retreating? Because Octavian was smart. He completely refused to fight their kind of fight. His faster boats just danced around, staying out of range of those big cannons. This forced Antony's giant ships to break their strong formation, and everything just descended into chaos. Seeing the battle turning, Cleopatra made a call, a tactical retreat to save her ships and the war chests they carried. And when Antony saw her go, he abandoned his own flagship to follow her. That single decision was the nail in the coffin. Octavian swept in and cleaned up the rest. He just completely outsmarted them. All right, Section 5, Egypt's last pharaoh. After that disaster at Actium, well, the end came pretty fast. And in her final move, she took control of her own destiny. See, if she was captured, she'd be dragged through the streets of Rome in chains, a trophy for Octavian's victory parade. Cleopatra refused to let that happen. She died a queen, on her own terms. And with her death, a dynasty that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years was just over. Egypt was no longer independent. It was now just another piece of the Roman Empire. Okay, before we wrap up, let's hit our glossary classroom to go over a couple of key words you really need to know to understand Cleopatra's world. First up, pharaoh. Now, this title meant way more than just king. The pharaoh was seen as the literal bridge between the gods and humanity. So for Cleopatra to be the very last person to ever hold that title, that's a huge deal. It marks a massive turning point in history. And then there's the asp, an Egyptian cobra. You know, even the way she's said to have died was full of symbolism. The asp wasn't just any snake. It was a symbol of royalty, of divine power. By choosing it, she was making one final, powerful statement about who she was. Not a Roman prisoner, but the pharaoh of Egypt, right to the very end. So, where does that leave us? Cleopatra? A failed ruler? Or a brilliant strategist? I mean, in the end, she lost her kingdom to Rome, which was pretty much an unstoppable force. But for more than 20 years, she played this impossible game against giants and kept Egypt free. She used her brains, her charm, her political savvy to survive. So, was she a failure, or was she one of the most brilliant survivors history has ever seen? That's definitely something to think about.